Well, at BYU, we like to talk about our national reputation in foreign languages, especially the number of languages spoken and taught on campus. But our speaker today brings an even more impressive resume. I won't ask for a show of hands, but how many of you are fluent in Hungarian, Arabic, English, Russian, French, Italian, and basic Hebrew? Very impressive. His Excellency Bokor was appointed Consul General in 2007, having served previously as Chief of State Protocol in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as a non-resident ambassador for Beirut and Amman, and ambassador to Damascus. He's also served as non-resident ambassador to Nicosia, Cyprus, and ambassador to Beirut. He's served in diplomatic service as Director General and Deputy Director General for the Department of Middle East and Africa, and as an advisor for the Department of Policy Planning in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as well as various other appointments since his first post in 1981 as an attaché in the Hungarian embassy in Aden, Yemen. His academic studies include an MA in Political Sciences from Moscow State University of International Relations and an MA in Economics from Budapest University of Economics, graduating with distinction in both. A native of Budapest, he and his wife are the parents of 2 daughters. The title for his presentation today, Fall of the Iron Curtain, the Hungarian-Austrian border 20 years later. Please join us in welcoming His Excellency Balázs Bokor.
Thank you very much, and I'm very happy to be here with you. This is my 3rd visit to Salt Lake City and to this beautiful university, which I always found very open-minded university, and really I envy you that you study here. This is a good university. Well, 1989, that was a year that changed the map of Europe and then the world. That's usually, we say, like a title when we speak about the events 20 years ago, in 1989. Just to tell you that how important these issues we consider, that this year, when we are celebrating or commemorating the 20th anniversary, in the 19 states of the consular district of Los Angeles Consul General, from Texas to Montana, if you draw a line and everything to the west, I'm responsible for, 12 governors of 12 states, including Utah. That was the first official proclamation by the new governor of Utah to declare Hungary Day, 19th of August. 19th of August, I will speak later on, that's an important date when at the Hungarian-Austrian border, the border was opened and so many East German citizens could flee with the tacit consent of the Hungarian government to the west. And that really was the first step of falling the wall, collapsing the communism. And as the former Chancellor of Germany, Helmut Kohl, spoke about this issue, he told that the first brick of the Berlin Wall was kicked out by the Hungarian government in 1989. So when I come to this matter and to this subject, I definitely want to draw your attention that how much you don't know what a difference between 1989 and 2009 and the period before 1989. You don't know because you are young and you take it normal as it is now in the world. And you don't see how important things were going on when still 2 great powers were functioning, 2 hostile to each other, political, economical, social system was competing. So that's a great change. When tanks were still standing toward the other side. I just want to tell you one small example, which is not far from here, taken from Arizona. I visited Arizona last May, and south of Tucson, there is a Titan missile site, which is a museum, the Titan Museum now. You may not heard about that there were 54 sites in the US, mostly in Arizona, Arkansas, and Tennessee, where huge missiles were ready for functioning against communism. Definitely the other side had the same. This Titan Missile Museum, which I visited, and this is the only site because all the other sites were dismantled in the late 80s here in the US, is a terrible memory of what was in the competing system. The missile there has a warhead which is 600 times stronger than the Hiroshima bomb was. 600 times. 54 sites were ready in the US against communism, and many more on the communist side against the US. Thanks God it didn't happen. Thanks God that the system of competing and system of hostile nations is over. 1989 really made a big change, and as a result of this big changes, unilateral system of political structure was set up. Hungary and the other countries of the former socialist bloc had become members of the NATO first, later the European Union, so they are sharing the same values as any other allies in this system, from the United States to United Kingdom, from France to Germany, and so on and so forth. And what happened then made possible for you also to visit Europe with one single visa. You arrive to any European country, and you will not see any more borders, and you go from France to Germany, from Germany to Austria, from Austria to Hungary, non-stopped, no border. This is something which was not done in 1989. So when we go back to 1989, we should say that just as the change of system in Hungary can be interpreted only in a wider regional and international context, so this more extensive trend, the end of the Cold War, the end of the East-West standoff, provided a historical base, motivation, and a room for maneuvering for the Hungarian foreign policy change of the era. From a historical perspective, the erosion of the former Soviet Union, the Gorbachev reforms that had consequences far beyond those originally envisioned by us, the elections in Poland in 1989, the opening of the Hungarian border, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Velvet Revolution later in Prague, in Czech Republic, and the events in December in Romania, the bloody pictures you may have recalled, execution of the hated dictator Ceausescu, and the reunification of Germany in October 1990. The termination of the Warsaw Pact and the Comecon, the economic system structure of the socialist bloc, all fit within the same broad trend. Of course, I don't want to claim here that everything was decided in Hungary in this change, or by Hungarians, but we should be fair with the evaluation of the historic events. An American historian, a well-known American historian, John Lewis Gaddis, who is a professor at the Yale University, had a book, and I want to refer to this. In the closing chapter of his latest work on the Cold War, Gaddis, professor acknowledges those he contributed to the peaceful end to decades of East-West confrontation. He names several factors as reasons, specifically efforts made by the Poles and the East Germans. And he usually refers to the general contribution of the ordinary man in Eastern and Central Europe. However, in his response to the question as to what brought about the end of the Cold War, Professor Gaddis suggests that it is possible all this was implemented by the Hungarians, who declared their barbed wire obsolete and then attended a mass funeral for a person who died 31 years ago. So let's go in a bit to these issues. The person for whom hundreds of thousands people came together in a commemorative event on the Hero Square in Budapest in 1989, still days before the change of regime, was called Imre Nagy. He was the prime minister of the 1956 revolution of the Hungarian people, which was bloodily oppressed by the Soviets, and they showed that no nations inside the social bloc should think about quitting and getting rid of communism. Thus, the American historian, in his concise way, also alludes to one of the features of the turning point in Hungary in 1989, this important event. Of all the states of Central Eastern Europe, all the members of the former socialist bloc, in the course of the change of system, Hungary was the only one to deal in any significant way with clearing up the past, with the rehabilitation of the earlier, much vilified popular uprising of 1956. In brief, it means, and that's very important to go to 1956 to understand 1989, that Hungary took the critically important first step toward freeing itself. I don't want to go into the details of 1956, but you may know well that it was a failure at the end. The revolution was defeated. Many thousands of people were killed. Nearly 300,000 people emigrated from Hungary like refugees to the United States. That's how now we have 1,300,000 American Hungarians in the United States. But this 1956 was a signal for the communist regime in Moscow that something started. Something showed up to the world that this will not be able to go on for a long decade. 1989, of course, that was not a kind of popular uprising, but it was really, let's say, the will of the government, which is very paradoxal, that the will of the still communist government to dismantle the Iron Curtain. The Iron Curtain, you should imagine, it's a barbed wire with electricity on the border of Austria and Hungary, where so many people wanted to escape and died, or because they were shot down by the border guards or by the electricity, they died. So this is a symbolical thing that the Hungarian government started to dismantle the Iron Curtain, and the work on dismantling the Iron Curtain started on the 2nd of May, 1989, attended by the media. And the moment when that time Hungarian Foreign Minister Gyula Horn, along with his Austrian counterpart, symbolically cut through the barbed wire, it was in the full glare of television cameras, and it was really a kind of miracle because it was without the consent of the Soviet leadership, and the Soviet leadership knew about this plan just minutes before it happened. The population of East Germany learned about this dismantling process, and you know that there was the Berlin Wall, which was not less brutal than the Iron Curtain at the Austrian-Hungarian border. So the East Germans came massively to Hungary. It was already and always a touristic spot in Hungary that the West German and East German families met in a socialist country, because the East Germans were not permitted to go out to the West. The West Germans could come to Hungary. There was the meeting point. So the East Germans came there and waited for something. They felt something, big changes in the air with this cutting the Iron Curtain. And it happened that the green border was open, the massive emigration or fleeing out of the East Germans started via the Hungarian border. This step, the Hungarian government's decision, was preceded by a relatively brief yet complex political diplomatic game, most of which took place behind the scenes that time. Hungary was forced to maneuver between Bonn, that time capital of West Germany, East Berlin, and Moscow, and sound out the risks. Although cautious diplomatic steps to test the water prior to the border opening suggested that the Soviet Union would go along with such a measure, nobody was really prepared to say for certain whether this would actually be the case or not, because we had the bad experience in 1956. In the end, although the Hungarian government announced that it had to act for humanitarian reasons, it was evident that in the face of the opposing wishes of the Federal Republic of Germany and the East German state, communist state, the German Democratic Republic, the opening of the borders and the repatriation of refugees to East Germany, Hungary had come down in Bonn's favor and against East Berlin in German domestic relations. This was an extraordinary important step on the part of a signatory of the Warsaw Pact acting against the ally, East Germany. And all the more so because the decision in favor of Bonn was not